Every morning, Emily Harper took the same winding road through the small town of Willow Creek, Oregon. For 2 years, the route to her job at the local library was predictable, almost meditative, until her eyes caught on a troubling sight. In the backyard of a weathered gray house on Cedar Lane, a Malinois dog was tethered to a rusty metal pole. The chain was short, barely allowing the dog to move beyond a tight circle. A makeshift shelter, little more than a rotting wooden crate, offered scant protection from the Pacific Northwest's relentless rain or blistering summer heat. The dog's sleek coat, once likely a rich tan and black, was now matted and dull, its ribs faintly visible beneath the fur. Emily had noticed the dog during her first year driving by, but something always held her back: fear of confrontation, the assumption someone else would step in, or the nagging voice that said it wasn't her place. But one rainy March morning in 2025, something shifted. The Malinois, soaked and shivering, lifted its head as her car slowed. Its amber eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that felt almost human, as if pleading for her to act. Emily pulled over, her heart pounding. She couldn't drive past again. Stepping out into the drizzle, Emily approached the chain-link fence separating the yard from the road. The dog stood, ears pricked, its posture cautious but not aggressive. "Hey, buddy," she called softly, her voice trembling. The Malinois didn't bark or growl, just watched her with a quiet intelligence that sent a shiver down her spine. She pulled out her phone, snapping photos of the dog's condition: the muddy ground, the short chain, the flimsy crate. Her hands shook as she zoomed in on the dog's thin frame and the raw patches where the collar had chafed its neck. Determined, Emily marched to the front door of the house and knocked. After a long pause, a man in his late 40s answered, his face lined with irritation. "What do you want?" he barked, his voice rough as gravel. "I'm worried about your dog," Emily said, forcing her voice to stay steady. "He's out there in the rain, barely sheltered, and he looks unwell." The man, whose name she later learned was Carl Grayson, scowled. "Dog's fine. Got food, got water. Mind your own damn business." Before she could respond, he slammed the door. Emily stood frozen, rain soaking through her jacket. She glanced back at the Malinois, who hadn't taken its eyes off her. For the first time, its tail twitched. A subtle movement, not quite a wag, but enough to spark a resolve in her. "I'll be back," she whispered, more to herself than the dog. "I promise." That evening, Emily sat at her kitchen table, her laptop open to local animal welfare websites. She called every organization in Willow Creek and the surrounding counties, but the responses were disheartening. If the dog has food, water, and some form of shelter, it's hard to prove neglect under current laws, one coordinator explained. "We're stretched thin as it is." Frustrated but undeterred, Emily began documenting everything. She photographed the dog daily, noting weather conditions, the state of the crate, and the rare occasions when Carl appeared to toss a bowl of kibble into the yard. She named the dog Orion, after the constellation that shone brightly above Willow Creek on clear nights, a symbol of resilience in darkness. Orion began to recognize her car, standing at attention when she pulled up, the chain pulling taut as he strained to get closer to the fence. Emily tossed high-quality treats over the barrier, which Orion caught with startling precision, despite his limited mobility. Each visit deepened her connection to him, and she couldn't shake the feeling that Orion understood her words, his eyes tracking her with an uncanny awareness. One evening, as Emily spoke softly through the fence, Orion tilted his head, his gaze unwavering. "You're not just any dog, are you?" she murmured. The Malinois let out a low, almost deliberate huff, as if agreeing. That moment planted the first seed of a mystery Emily couldn't yet fathom. After weeks of documentation, Emily learned Carl was a mechanic who worked irregular hours, often leaving Orion alone for days. She consulted a friend, Rachel, a paralegal with a passion for animal rights. "Keep detailed records," Rachel advised. "Photos, dates, times, everything. If you can show a pattern of neglect, animal control might step in. But Emily, this could take months. Be careful." Time was a luxury Emily feared Orion didn't have. The winter rains were relentless, and the crate offered little protection. One morning she arrived to find Orion lying down, his breathing shallow, his body trembling in the cold. Panic surged through her. Without thinking, she climbed the fence, ignoring the no trespassing sign. Orion watched her approach, his eyes calm despite his weakened state. Kneeling beside him, Emily offered water from a bottle she carried. He drank eagerly, his tongue brushing her hand. Up close, Orion's condition was worse than she'd realized. His coat was patchy, his skin irritated from the constant dampness. As she gently stroked his head, her fingers brushed against his collar, caked with mud. Cleaning it carefully, she noticed tags she hadn't seen before. Her breath caught as she read them. Vega, K9 Unit, Contact, Margaret Ellison, Portland, Oregon. The address and phone number were from a city over 150 miles away. With trembling hands, Emily dialed the number. A woman's voice answered, cautious but warm. Hello? This might sound strange, Emily began, but I'm with a Malinois named Vega, chained in a backyard in Willow Creek. Is he yours? A long silence followed, then a choked sob. Vega? That's impossible. He vanished with my brother Nathan, over a year ago. Their truck was found abandoned. No trace of either of them. Emily's heart raced. She looked at Vega, whose eyes seemed to carry a weight far beyond his suffering. Ma'am, you need to come here, now. The next day, Margaret Ellison arrived with her friend Laura, who drove her from Portland. Margaret, in her late 60s, moved with a slight limp but carried herself with determination. They met Emily at a cozy coffee shop in Willow Creek, where Margaret clutched a worn photo album and a folder of documents. Before we see him, Margaret said, her voice unsteady, you need to know about Nathan. He was a K9 handler for the state police. Vega was his partner for 5 years. When Nathan retired, he adopted Vega. They were inseparable. Laura picked up the story. Last March, Nathan was driving to visit Margaret when he and Vega disappeared. His truck was found on a rural road. Doors open, no signs of a struggle. The police searched for months, but the case went cold. They suggested Nathan might have chosen to disappear, but we never believed it. He loved his work, his life, Vega. Emily showed them her photos of the chained Malinois. Margaret's hands shook as she nodded. That's Vega. But how did he end up here? And where's Nathan? They drove to Carl Grayson's house, parking discreetly across the street. Vega was in his usual spot, but today he stood taller, as if sensing something momentous. We should call the police, Laura urged. This is evidence in a missing person case. Emily hesitated. Carl claims he got the dog from a guy at a gas station. We need to be careful how we approach this. As they debated, a police cruiser pulled into Carl's driveway. Emily's eyes widened. I sent my documentation to the sheriff's office last night, she admitted. I didn't expect them to act this fast. From their vantage point, they watched as an officer approached the backyard while another knocked on the door. Carl emerged, his gestures defensive. An animal control van arrived shortly after. The confrontation escalated until an officer showed Carl something on a tablet. Carl's demeanor shifted from anger to unease, and he began talking rapidly, pointing down the road. To everyone's surprise, the officers didn't load Vega into the animal control van. Instead, they led him toward Margaret's car. Emily helped Margaret out, and the moment Vega saw her, he let out a joyous bark, straining against the leash to reach her. Margaret dropped to her knees, tears streaming as Vega pressed against her, nuzzling her face. The reunion was electric, undeniable proof of their bond. At the police station, the atmosphere was heavy with anticipation. Vega stayed glued to Margaret's side, his low whines punctuating the silence whenever she paused stroking his fur. Detective Clara Ruiz spread documents and photos across the table. Carl Grayson claims he bought the dog from a man at a gas station near Redmond last March. Paid $200, no papers. Says the guy looked rough, mid-30s, blonde hair, tattoo on his neck. Emily noticed Vega's ears twitch at the description, his body tensing. He's reacting, she said, her voice low. He knows something. Ruiz raised an eyebrow but continued. The man's description matches a person of interest, Ethan Cole, a drifter with a record for theft and assault. His last known address was near where Nathan's truck was found. We're reopening the case. Margaret clutched Vega's leash. Nathan trained Vega to respond to complex commands. He's not just a pet, he's a working dog with instincts most people can't imagine. Emily leaned forward. What if Vega can lead us to where he was before Carl got him? Police use K9S to find people all the time. Why not let Vega try? Ruiz hesitated, but Margaret's firm nod sealed the decision. It's worth a shot. Vega's trained to track. If he recognizes a location, he'll show us. 2 days later, the plan was in motion. Based on Carl's story, they focused on areas near Redmond, where Ethan Cole had last been seen. Vega rode in a K9 unit vehicle, his posture alert, eyes scanning the surroundings. At a deserted lot near an old warehouse, Vega's behavior changed. He pulled hard on his leash, leading the team down a narrow path to a crumbling storage shed. He circled it urgently, then sat in front of a locked door, barking sharply. The officers secured a warrant and pried open the door. Emily and Margaret waited outside, holding their breath. After what felt like an eternity, an officer called out, "We've got something! Evidence team, now!" Vega emerged first, pressing against Margaret as officers exited the shed, their faces grim. "No body," Ruiz reported, "but we found blood, hair, and a wallet with Nathan's ID. Someone was held here." Margaret gasped, clutching Vega's fur. The dog let out a sound, a low, mournful whine that seemed to carry the weight of everything he'd endured. The evidence was clear. Vega wasn't just a victim of neglect. He was a witness to a crime. The investigation moved quickly. Ethan Cole was arrested a week later in a nearby town, charged with kidnapping and assault. The shed's evidence, Nathan's blood, fingerprints, and signs of a struggle, confirmed Cole's involvement. Vega's reactions during interviews, growling at Cole's name, helped pressure him into a partial confession. He admitted to ambushing Nathan after a bar fight, intending to rob him. When Nathan fought back, Cole panicked, locking him in the shed. Vega, left in Nathan's truck, had escaped and tracked them to the shed. In the chaos, Nathan managed to free Vega, who attacked Cole, giving Nathan a chance to flee. Cole, injured, sold Vega to Carl Grayson, assuming both Nathan and the dog were gone for good. But Nathan's whereabouts remained a mystery. The shed was in a remote area, surrounded by dense forests and rugged cliffs. "He could still be out there," Ruiz said, "injured, disoriented, but alive. We're organizing a search." Emily looked at Vega, who had been restless since the shed discovery. "Let Vega lead. If anyone can find Nathan, it's him." The search began at dawn. Vega, fitted with a GPS-equipped K9 vest, moved with purpose, ignoring attempts to restrain him until Margaret took the leash. "He knows what we're looking for," she said. Starting at the shed, Vega led the team away from the road, deeper into the forest. He followed an invisible trail, his nose low, pausing only to sniff specific spots. After 2 miles, he stopped at a rocky outcrop, barking frantically at a narrow crevice. The team widened the opening and found a small cave. Inside were signs of survival: a makeshift fire pit, empty cans, and a journal wrapped in plastic. The last entry, dated 3 months prior, read, "Nathan Ellison. Injured, hiding. If found, contact Margaret Ellison. Vega, I hope you're safe." The discovery ignited hope. Nathan had survived the initial escape, using his police training to sustain himself. But the winter had been brutal, and his injuries were severe. Vega, undeterred, pressed on, leading the team another mile to a hidden lean-to camouflaged against a cliff. As they approached, Vega's barks turned to high-pitched whines. A faint voice called from inside, "Vega? Is that you?" Nathan was alive, barely. Emaciated, with a poorly healed arm fracture, he was barely conscious but responsive. Medics airlifted him to a hospital in Portland, Vega riding beside him, refusing to leave. In the hospital, Emily and Margaret sat by Nathan's bedside. Vega lay on the floor, his head resting on Nathan's hand, granted special permission to stay. "He's a miracle," the doctor said. "Surviving 18 months out there with a broken arm and minimal resources. It's unheard of." Margaret smiled through tears. "Nathan always said Vega was his guardian. Now I see why." Nathan's recovery was slow but steady. His arm required surgery, and the psychological toll of isolation and fear would take time to heal. But Vega's presence was transformative, grounding him in a way no therapy could. Emily, too, found herself changed. She left her library job to work with a regional animal rescue, advocating for stricter tethering laws inspired by Vega's story. 6 months later, Emily visited Margaret's home in Portland. Nathan, now walking with a cane, sat on the porch with Vega, whose coat gleamed in the sunlight. The Malinois trotted to greet Emily, circling her joyfully. "Right on time," Nathan said, his voice stronger, his eyes bright. Today was a milestone. Vega had been certified as a therapy dog, and Nathan was launching a program to train canines for veterans with PTSD, with Vega as the lead demonstration dog. "He scored perfectly," Nathan said, scratching Vega's ears. "The trainers said he reads people better than most humans." Margaret joined them, camera in hand. "We need a photo of the team that saved each other," she insisted. Nathan's term for their journey, Emily saving Vega, Vega saving Nathan, and the experience reshaping Emily's life, had become their mantra. Emily had found purpose in advocacy, a new career, and a deepening bond with Nathan and Margaret. Their weekly dinners, walks with Vega, and shared dreams of helping others had forged a family born from crisis. As they posed for the photo, Vega sat between Emily and Nathan, his presence a steady bridge. "You didn't just save him," Nathan said to Emily. "You gave us all a second chance." Vega tilted his head, eyes locking onto Emily's with the same knowing gaze she'd seen months ago. The chains that once bound him were gone, replaced by connections of trust, love, and purpose. In that moment, Emily knew she'd never drive past suffering again. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe for more tales of courage and connection. Share it with someone who needs inspiration, and help spread the message that one act of bravery can break any chain.